3, 2, 1. Well, Lewis, we made it. We did it. Episode 1 in the books. As it's probably important to note, at the time of recording episode 2, we don't have episode 1 uploaded yet. But we know that we're going to get at least 4 views on that because of people that we know that are about to watch it. So if you look at that increase from week 0 to week 1, we've gone from nothing to 4. That's literally infinite percentage increase.
Infinite gains, right?
Exactly.
In 1 week.
Exactly. So if we carry on that trend, this episode is about to get 4 infinite views.
4 infinite. I know. I'm pretty excited for uploading this video, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Once we make the YouTube channel, we'll be golden.
I was kind of like last week, once we got it sorted, I think after we recorded, we were more like tired than we thought we were going to be. I was
Right.
definitely like quite mentally exhausted after the conversation, which I wasn't expecting. We sat in Skype for a little bit and we were just kind of like, you know?
Yeah. I feel 2 hours of just concentrating on just listening to each other. We do it all the time, but for some reason behind a camera, it was hyper focused.
Yeah, I think maybe the nerves have something to do with it as well. But then having watched it, I watched it on Wednesday. I think I watched it on Wednesday night, and I know we said last week, like if we didn't think it was good enough, or we didn't think it was like natural or flowy,
right,
we were just gonna like maybe not upload it and like keep going, keep practicing until we thought it was a reasonable upload. But having watched it, I'm not saying that it's good by any means, but I think that it's a much better attempt than we could ever have hoped for. Like it came across as like so natural, like it was how I think we talk.
Right, that's exactly it. That you and I were, I think for week 1, both of us went to the intention of, let's not worry about like transitions or worrying about getting our segments right or worry about intro and outro. Let's just make sure that the main bulk of the content was natural and it sounded like a conversation between you and I, and kind of follows this a rough flow,
Sure.
And I was really, really happy with how it turned out, honestly. I think it kind of demonstrated how you and I work through thought processes, how we kind of started on issues and tend to reinforce ideas. I think it's really what I love about the conversations with you is that we're able to like rephrase the questions that are on each other's mind, and I think through the episode that's kind of captured, and at the end of the day we were able to, like you were saying just before this video, we're able to like recapture the initial thought we had in our head in a more cohesive light, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah. When like listening back to it, I think the intro and the outro we were a bit jangly at the beginning and the end, and that was a little bit nerves. But then once we got into the actual bulk of the conversation, we were like absolutely fine, and it was absolutely great, I thought. So, if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a conversational podcast between 2 friends discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Yep. Each week, Scott and I will go away and we'll bring to the podcast a topic that's been on our minds that we've been thinking about. The idea behind these episodes is that we'll have a discussion, disseminate our views a little bit, and hopefully reach some sort of new conclusion that we hadn't really occurred to us before.
Yeah, so the topics that we brought up last week I thought were really good in terms of showcasing what we wanted to put in the podcast. They were quite thought-provoking subjects that really had made a good example of the conversations that we have and the kind of thoughts that I think we want to share. And the topic that you brought to the table sort of inspired the topic that I've been thinking about this week.
Okay.
So I think you and I are quite big Star Wars fans, and I think we're big Star Wars fans for different reasons as well, which is quite a good dynamic when we talk about Star Wars.
Right.
So, and this topic will kind of follow nicely along from last week's topic, which was the message, which ended up being the messaging in media. And the topic that I'm thinking about this week is how to keep your fans happy, a Star Wars story. So right now when it comes to like media, when it comes to film, and not even just Hollywood, but like also things like YouTube, there seems to be a lot of bad content right now, or at least content that's like received like really negatively, or even content that's being rehashed. Like you see it on YouTube all the time right now, where if I watch a video, my recommended feed becomes the person who's doing that video, and then it becomes like a bunch of reacts videos or re-uploads of that content from like channels. Like I've been watching quite a bit of Among Us recently, and the guys at Offline TV do a lot of Among Us content, and there seems to be like 6 or 7 channels that I've kind of like sprouted out right now that are just re-uploads of the stuff that they're doing, and these channels also have like thousands and thousands of views.
Right. Okay.
So
It's like, this is like React videos. Someone is at the bottom hand corner, like pausing and saying, "Shouldn't have done that," type of thing.
no, it's not. These videos are literally them just snipping pieces out of their stream. So it's literally just they stream the content. These people just like snip it and they put it on a video themselves, and it's just like a second channel for this person that isn't affiliated with them. So that's like bad content, and there seems to be like quite a lot of it, and there seems to be quite a lot of negativity going on about it as well. So Star Wars is kind of like that, where it came out in the 70s and it was really it was well liked, and then across the generations, across like the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy, it's getting a bit of a bad rap, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of like negative reaction towards it, and I just wondered how this is happening. Like, what are they doing that's causing this like negative reaction, and how can they be keeping their fans like happy in these stories? What are they doing that is making people unhappy, if you know what I mean?
Right, but particularly with the most recent trilogy of films that came out, I take it that's where some of this emphasis is going to be on.
Well, yes, but there was also a lot of negative backlash for the prequel trilogy as well.
Right. Actually, that thought just had occurred to me. People did hate that. We'll need to come from this conversation from a perspective of two people that are looking back in time. It's because we were both pretty young when the prequels came out, and we weren't really part of or aware of that crowd of people at the time that had such a negative view of those films. So that, I'm sure when you and I watched that films, I know I loved them. I was just blown away.
Yeah,
I got to see lightsaber battles. I got to see people using the force jumping around and stuff like that. I thought they were absolutely brilliant.
So I don't know about you, but one of the things that I love about Star Wars, and I think that the reason that I love the movies so much is just the Sith and the Jedi and the Force. Like those are like the three sort of like staples in these franchises. The lightsaber battles, the fact that these people have these like space wizards that have these powers. But there's a lot of people that like things like the expanded universe or the old expanded universe and the bounty hunters and stuff like that. So that the reason that I resonate with Star Wars is the Force. Basically, it's the Sith and the Jedi. What is it about Star Wars that you enjoy?
Yeah, I love the Force. Love it. I love the connections to like emotion in the Force. I love the ideas of like there being opposite sides of the same coin. I like the kind of the themes of how there's like polar opposites, but how it's not quite so simple. There's like the dark and the light, and there's also kind of some nuance there. I particularly love the Force powers. Everyone has to love that, right? But for me, it's also the rules of the Force powers. I like the established lore that's existed and how they can implement it. And I think the problem I have a little bit is with Star Wars, the first one I'm identifying, is that for me, Star Wars, in terms of the films, going outside of like the extended universe, for me it was always the story of Anakin Skywalker.
Sure.
Right. It was like the original trilogy came out, and as much as Luke was obviously the protagonist, it was all Vader was as much in the spotlight as Luke. It felt very much it was his story. And when the prequels came out, looking back, we realised that it was a prequel to his story, and we realised that what this was going to be was a complete saga of the life of Anakin Skywalker, and
sure.
That was.
I think Vader ended up being the character in the franchise, whether it was meant to be about Luke or not.
That's a good question.
Vader eventually it became about him. So the topic this week, while we're going to sort of concentrate on Star Wars a little bit, I kind of wanted to make it a bit more about how to keep fans happy in general and why people have such negative reaction to a lot of content right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that it's a bit more relatable. So you think about something like Game of Thrones as well. That was like a massive thing in the media like in the last few years, and there was such a negative backlash to the final season. Like people like hated it.
Yeah. Sure.
So this seems to be a recurring theme right now. But for Star Wars specifically, I kind of want to start there, and I want to talk about why people didn't like that. So first of all, I thought it'd be good to just go through a recap of Star Wars and why people like resonated with it as well, why people thought it was good. So Star Wars was this sort of sci-fi action movie that came out in the late 70s. It was about this young guy called Luke who sort of lived in this backwater like planet, and like poverty, just kind of lived with his aunt and uncle, had to like work every single day for a living, basically just try to keep food on the table, stuff like that. And eventually, one day he finds this space wizard guy, comes to him and tells him that he's like really special, that he has like this power. And I think that's the first thing people start to like resonate with it, because I think it's the same reason people like Harry Potter, because at some moment someone just swoops in and tells the protagonist that they're actually special, they're not the normal person that they wish they weren't. And it's like,
there is this bigger world around you,
yeah,
and you're going to go through that journey.
You're actually someone that matters. Like you're the special person in the story, and that's kind of what the protagonist has been like wishing the whole time. So Luke eventually finds out he's this Jedi Knight, and his father was this powerful warrior, and he goes off, and it's almost like a fighting against the man story as well, where like the Resistance tries to like fight back against the oppressive Empire, which is
it's David versus Goliath, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's sort of like a metaphor for how I think the average person like sees the world as well. Like you talk about the average person, when they think about the government, they normally have like negative reactions. They feel controlled, they feel like they're not acting in their interest, like etc. But
the game is rigged type of thing.
Yeah, the Empire is just a more obvious version of evil in their eyes.
Sure.
So they're just trying to fight against it. So Luke eventually becomes sort of one of the leaders of this resistance. He becomes like this really special character, the first Jedi warrior for God knows how long, and rises up. And his sort of adversary in the dark also rises up at the same time, or like has risen and kind of exists in the universe, and that is in Darth Vader, who, of course, eventually, spoilers, turns out to be his father. And he's basically the sort of face of the Empire, and it sort of culminates in a battle between those. So I think it's quite obvious to see why people liked that trilogy, and I don't know. I don't think you can call it a cult classic, because it's like
just too big to be a cult classic.
Sure, that's what I was thinking today. I was thinking, does cult classic kind of have to be like a smaller film? Does Star Wars make too much money to be a cult classic?
I think to be a cult classic, you have to have been unsuccessful at the time, and then later on, people have looked back and realised how brilliant it was. But people have always thought the original trilogy of Star Wars is brilliant. It is the quintessential hero story. Where you start off with small beginnings, as you said, realise you have this power that makes you special. There is such an obvious good guy, and there's the obvious bad guy, and it's a story of the good overcoming the bad. It's simple, pretty straightforward, but brilliantly done. And I think it was able to capture people's imagination with these Star Wars sci-fi concepts that were relatively new for the time.
Sure, but because obviously we're younger than when these movies came out, we weren't born when these movies came out. We didn't see any of the negative reaction at the time, which I'm sure there must have been. So we don't really know too much about that. We can only really talk about what our experience is like today. And the people that watched Star Wars back then, the ones that talk about it anyway, seem to just love it. They don't have like any bad things to say about it. And then when they have negative reaction about it, they bring up the newer franchises in it. So
Definitely.
so 20 years later, George Lucas then revived it, and he wrote this prequel trilogy, which was basically the origin story of Darth Vader. Now, first of all, I think that's probably a red flag, and that's one of the ways that you can make your fans unhappy, like straight off the bat. And that is to take a character who is mysterious, this guy's evil to his core. He's the quintessential bad guy. He's probably the coolest character you could ever have made at the time. It just happened to be a perfect storm of ingredients, and this character is just amazing. And then to tell people how that happened, it's never going to be like good in someone's mind. The story that people thought might have happened is always going to be better than when you tell them the story, right?
Right, yeah. You'll never be able to capture the epicness of like the myth that people have come up with, right? There are like we weren't there at the time, but imagine the fan theories that must have been cutting about. Like there's so many. I'm sure there must have been so much speculation, and the character was just so bigger than anything I'd seen so far. It's looking back, it's a bold decision for Lucas to even have taken to have went down that route. But I don't know whether that was maybe the intention from the get-go. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it was, because the first Star Wars was originally called Star Wars. Like it wasn't
right.
It wasn't like titled anything. It wasn't like episode
it wasn't
4 or anything. No, exactly.
No.
Well, he may have had the idea to do that later on, but I don't think it would. I'd imagine that idea came later down the line.
Yeah, I guess I'm more curious as to whether that idea came about during the writing of Empire Strikes Back, or whether that came after the first trilogy.
It probably was due to the reaction of people to the character, right? People loved Darth Vader, and then he was like, "Well, let's make a movie about these guys."
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, but as you said, it's a really high risk, high reward. It's because how are you ever going to tackle Skywalker, and everyone, especially as well with Vader, it's kind of hard. It's because you knew what the end was going to be, right? Everyone knew where it was going to start and where the end had to get to. It was just, I don't know. I personally absolutely love the prequels. I know that we're saying that a huge amount of people like they really they didn't like the prequels and what they achieved, but I don't know about you, but personally in my eyes, what do you think of Anakin's story? Anakin from starting off as the young boy found in Tatooine to becoming Vader in Revenge of the Jedi. Revenge of the Jedi? Return, sorry. I think I got that wrong.
So, yeah, I think it was Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi. But so in the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, I think they're like two sides of a coin. I think the original trilogy is a poor story which is told extremely well, and the prequel trilogy is a great story that is told atrociously.
Right.
So the actual plot line behind the prequel trilogy is phenomenal, I think, but the way that it came across on the big screen is just not good. Like when we just described the original trilogy there, it's quite a basic story. Like it's not really anything groundbreaking in terms of what it did, but the way it told the story was amazing. I remember speaking to my gran years and years ago. She told me about the time that she went to see The Empire Strikes Back in the cinema. And obviously the "I'm your father" thing has been a meme for our entire lives. You know, before memes were memes, like that. Yeah. That was that age's version of a meme. And like, can you imagine just sitting in that cinema and like watching that scene where you've got like this good versus evil, and then he brings up that revelation? She told me people were like screaming in the cinema. Like, she told me people were like standing up and like screaming at the screen.
I can imagine. Yeah, I really can.
Yeah, it must have been absolutely mental.
Well, I don't know. I've always thought two ways about this, because like obviously back then information was spread throughout the populace a different way than it is nowadays. But like Vader means father in German. You know, how many people?
I don't know. I don't know, man.
You know, I'm genuinely curious how much of a twist it was. You're right. Like, it's become so much of a meme because I think at the time it was like mind blowing for people, and I would do anything to have been in one of those theaters to see it happen. It's because I'm sure that it would have been incredible to have seen that sort of a twist. So I think that's actually a huge part of the reason why so many people say Empire is their favorite movie, just for that one reason alone.
I think so as well. I think it's also a great movie because evil kind of wins in that movie as well, which isn't something that often happens in like films. You don't often see like evil triumph, like, and I know it wasn't the end of the trilogy, but it was just different, I guess. That just makes the movie like different and stand out a little bit.
Yeah, it was a really good transitionary movie, wasn't it? You had A New Hope, which was, you know, this perfect small little self-contained hero story. Then you had Empire, where they started introducing bigger concepts. They start dropping these revelations, and it kind of hints towards the direction Luke will be heading in. And then, of course, you have the final movie, which really caps it all off.
Yeah, well, it does what every trilogy does, you know, where the first movie kind of can stand on its own, and then the second one really just sets up the end. What kind of thing? The second one sets up the third one.
Yeah, but which is, I think, quite interesting. It's because people tend to think that that transitionary movie is like a lull in the series, whereas in this series it's the exact opposite.
That's true. Yeah, that is true, I guess. So when we speak about how good a reaction people had to the first trilogy, and then to go into the prequel trilogy, I think immediately, like for what I've just said, it starts off on a bad foot, and then so you see Obi-Wan, which is like a character that we know and love, and you see his master at the beginning of the film, and you're like people could probably get into that, you know, they're probably sitting there, people that have watched the original trilogy, and they're maybe getting into that, and then immediately it kind of takes a sour turn where like they introduce characters like Jar Jar Binks, who I think is probably the most hated character in film's history.
Ever. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
to the point
I
where he's
agree
like
with
not
you
even
there.
in the third one. Like he's totally removed from it.
Thank God. I actually, before we even get on to talking about Jar Jar Binks, I would think that actually the first bad sign about the Phantom Menace was actually the yellow text at the beginning, where it starts talking about a trade war. You know, I don't think anyone at the time walking into a Star Wars film thought they were going to be getting this relatively political film. You know, the first scene is literally two Jedi's coming to negotiate out of an embargo. You know, it's like what's happening here? You know.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess the people that watched the original trilogy like the idea of like mystery and the Force and the Jedi, and they're like, oh, these powerful warriors and stuff like that, and they're doing battle like lightsaber duels, and then it immediately starts talking about a trade war. Yeah, I guess you're probably right. That probably was one of the factors in it. But then it almost like there are like a couple of like alien races in that film, like the Gungans, for example, and it's all like they're almost like a joke. You know what I mean? Like their inception into the movie. Like there was a lot of like alien races in the original trilogy, but they were like seedy and like, you know, they weren't like caricatures of something else.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like that the one of the best alien scenes ever is like in the cantina. You know, where you're like the guys are playing their saxophones and stuff like that, and you've got all these alien races, and as you said, like they're not none of these. Well, I guess not many of them, apart from like the guy with literally an arse on his face. You know, like I guess
he's
everyone
kind of
else
a joke,
is sure, yeah, exactly, but it's not quite as bad in the newer thing in the newer series. Like literally, what's as you said, the Gungans. Like what's that character all about? You know,
the big guy that like
he's
the big,
angry.
the big guy that like motorboats the air when he talks.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ.
Why? What was that all about? And like Anakin's slave owner, even him, I guess he's not quite as bad, but there's something almost comical. That could be a CGI thing instead of using prosthetics. You know, maybe that wasn't ever the intention. It obviously was with Jar Jar and the Gungans, though, right?
Yeah,
it could have just been the technology of the time. Maybe might not have applied to Star Wars.
So
I think
that was
there might be
quite
something to that.
That was quite early on in the movie as well, though. So like you got this trade war, and then you got this ridiculous alien race that's sort of introduced straight away. Now I don't think that the people that watched the original trilogies and loved them and came back to watch this like hyped for more Star Wars.
Right.
I'm not sure they even realised that they disliked this movie until they left the cinema. Like, I think they were probably watching this and being like, oh, Star Wars, yeah. And then they kind of left and they probably spoke to their friends about it and they were like, actually, that was shit.
Yeah, that was not what I was here for whatsoever. It probably didn't help as well that like the main character's Anakin and he's so young. You know, it's not cool. I don't think the first movie lost that cool factor. Like Darth Maul was terrific, but he didn't say a fucking word, not one word. You know, he was like by far the coolest thing in that film, and there was so little to even grasp onto. Yeah,
it would have been much better if he'd been the Sith that they were trying to kill for the first three movies, and then in the third movie, like Anakin maybe struck him down, and he became it like kind of took his place because he did strike him down. But yes, I agree. He was probably the coolest part of that movie, but in a way he's kind of like Vader if you think about it, because he's this sort of evil character. You don't really know where he came from. He's just this sort of like super competent badass individual who does all this martial arts and stuff like that. He totally takes out Obi-Wan's master at the beginning. Like, people liked him, I think.
Yeah, so do you reckon they were actually trying to like emulate the Vader character with Darth Maul then? I guess that would
maybe not emulate him, but just make someone that was just cool as well, you know.
Yeah, I think they did that. I think they did in that film. They did a pretty good job at demonstrating who the Jedi were and who the Sith were, and I quite liked. I'm sure people at the time didn't like it, but I liked the idea of the Force being more structured, you know, and it being like midichlorians, right? We have to talk about midichlorians.
Sure, yes, and so I think that was in the first movie, wasn't it? So they took like the Force, which was this similarly to how they did with Vader, where they took him and they gave him an origin story and they made him like a whiny child. Yeah. They took the Force, which was this mysterious entity that was kind of could make anyone special. You know, it was like it was.
That was the thing about Luke, is that he was just a normal guy.
He was a random, and it took this power that he had, and it was like, oh, this is actually quantifiable. Like we can measure this in people. It's like science sort of thing.
Oh, it's genetic as well.
Exactly.
You pass this down to your kid, you're gonna have force babies.
So it's at that point people are also kind of thinking that they're not relating to these characters anymore, because it's like, well, this can't happen to anyone, because if you don't have the midichlorians, then you can't be a Jedi, kind of thing.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. Like Yoda just so happened to have been born with fuck tons of midichlorians, or his race, they were just like having to be high in midichlorian levels.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that he's spent 900 years in deep meditation, learning, acquiring knowledge. It's the fact that he was born this way.
So I guess the first point that we're touching on already about things that make fans unhappy is that, like, there are certain things about these franchises that are like sacred. If you build up these things and you put them together and then people do resonate with them, you can't just like rip them down or like fundamentally change them or like show them behind the curtain.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I think it's got to do with unraveling the mystery.
Yeah.
I think that loses a lot of the allure, and I think the prequels, they really fell victim to that.
So the prequel trilogy also has this like love story for Anakin, where it's his transition to the dark side sort of thing, becoming like an evil Jedi. It's kind of the reason for him not wanting to be a Jedi anymore is because he wants to save his wife, basically, the woman that he's going to marry, which is kind of not allowed for Jedi in general. So you also have this, and it's, to be quite honest, it's probably directed more poorly than any other love scene I've ever like seen. I feel like this really could have been a good story. There was like the makings of a good story there, but the way it was like acted out, and I'm sure it wasn't the fault of like the actors that did it. It was the direction they were given and what they were told to do, and then it came out like really, really badly. So it becomes this almost like this. It takes Star Wars and makes it a terrible love story, which is just not what Star Wars is about, is it?
Yeah, I know that a huge amount of people have a problem with Hayden Christensen's acting and how he acted out his like desire for Padme, and like I know that their love story has been like, and like the whole scene where they're on like Padme's like home planet and they're like just basically flirting the whole time and stuff like that. I know people hate that, but I don't know, man. I just fucking love it. I love everything about Padme and Anakin. I love the way how Anakin, he's like, the dialogue's forced and stilted and you feel he's like really awkward. See, when I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't even like associate this with bad direction or acting. I'm just like, this is who Anakin was. I believe it. I don't know why. I can't relate to the hate for Anakin and Padme. It's because I love it. Like, see in the third movie where Padme is like crying, she's like saying to Anakin like, I love you, and like Anakin, the force is taking him. All he sees is the dark side. Like, I cry. That's so emotional. I find I honestly I can't even put it into words. I love the transition that Anakin goes through in such a big way. I know there's bad dialogue, I get it, but I don't even hear it. I'm just like, I'm thinking about what he's thinking. I'm thinking about the turmoil, and he set it up in a great way. There's also like there's a deleted scene, so it's obviously not in the movie, so it's not fair. But like where Kenobi actually talks to Padme, and like he admits that he's known about their love for years, and like he's deliberately hidden it from himself, and he's let it go ahead. It's because he knows that it's the only way that Anakin's ever been able to achieve happiness. Throughout his entire time, he's just lived this tortured life, and he's never had that release. And Padme was that for him. I don't know, man.
Well, the thing you're talking about is, it sounds like a good story. That's what I mean. It's like a good story. What we're talking about, it's just not portrayed like that. And I think that's the reason why people hate the second movie like most of all, because you did have a love story in the original trilogy, which was Princess Leia and Han Solo, and Han Solo was kind of this like cocky flyboy kind of thing.
It was much more subtle as well. Yeah,
it was sort of like he always knew that she fancied him, and it was like it wasn't like a will they won't they, it was like a when they kind of thing. But it took like Anakin and Padme, and it gave you this like deep, mysterious, badass character that is Darth Vader, and it made him like a broody teenager.
I guess you're totally right there. When you think about and Anakin and Padme's love story in the context of this is young Vader, then you definitely, there becomes a problem. I cannot deny that at all. Yeah, like I suppose I love the dynamic and I love what's happening in front of me, but there is it kind of feels weird that he becomes who Vader becomes. Like, he could have become another Sith, you know, and he could have kept in some of his traits, and he could have been a great Sith, but he was never going to be Vader. You know, I don't think there was ever going to be a good match there with the character that they gave young Anakin compared to the character that was Vader in the prequels.
Yeah, I think
Prequels,
honestly think
sorry,
that
the original.
I honestly think that relationship is the problem with the second movie. Like, I don't think the second movie outside of that is like, people wouldn't overly have a problem with it. Not any more than the first movie or the third movie. It's that those scenes and that relationship, like the one where they're sitting in the fireplace, man. That's
okay.
Torture, man.
Yeah. The one that always comes to mind is when like Anakin randomly just picks up her pear and cuts it in his hands over to her.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. There are a couple of weird ones. I'll
Really,
give you
like,
that, yeah.
awkward scenes that you're supposed to be like, this is really romantic, and it's just like
Yeah. Like Anakin's going riding this big fucking hog creature, and he falls over. She runs over. Anakin. And he's just pissed himself laughing. And it's like, what's going on here?
It's laughable, is what it is, and that's Darth Vader. You know, he's the guy that's like force choking people in the original trilogy. Like, that's why that's why people hate that one the most, I think.
Okay, you know what? I if I can go back and change my opinion, I suppose. I hate their relationship in the second film. I love where it goes in the third film. I think they redeem it a lot.
Yeah, I love the arc, and I love the idea of it, but the way it's portrayed is terrible. I think you're right about that.
Sure.
But then when you get to the third movie, though, and now he's starting to show you Darth Vader. You know, at the beginning of the third movie, it's like, oh, wait a minute, he's no longer a child. He's no longer a teenager. Now he's a grown adult, and he's kicking some serious ass. Like, at the beginning of the movie, like the guy that kicked his and Obi-Wan's ass at the same time in the second
takes
movie.
on one-on-one, right?
Yeah, like Obi-Wan gets knocked out seconds. Anakin just like literally chops off his head, and it's like, oh, okay. And like, he doesn't even have to do it. He's like, he's his prisoner at this point, and he just like kills him, and it's kind of like, he's now becoming this like badass character, and it's a bit, I think in the third movie it's a bit more believable of a performance.
I definitely agree with you, yeah. And also I think where you start to see the influence of the Chancellor come in a little bit more obviously. Thank God for the Chancellor. You know, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have the internet as it is. The memes that we have today wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Senate and the Chancellor. So I'm always thankful for that. But yeah, you definitely see the dark side coming out, and it's such a great start to the movie where he does the lops off his head.
Yeah,
you know?
The third movie is like more of, it does a better job at showing you why he wants to be on the dark side. You know, it gives him a sort of like, he's having these dreams about Padme dying, and he's trying to figure out for a way to save her and stuff like that. And although it was bad acting in the second movie, you understand they're in love now, and like it's a motivation for him, and the Chancellor kind of like manipulates him into doing that. Actually, I love the third movie. I think it's great.
I love the third movie. Yeah, I can't actually remember. Is the third movie where he returns to his home planet and finds his mum?
No, that's in the second movie.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, if we can go back to the second movie very briefly, I did like that scene. I thought that was a really good setup for how he's going to start, like how the darker side of his emotions can. I thought that was a really good setup, even before the third movie, where we start to see this. He wasn't Vader still.
No,
you know,
definitely
that wasn't the actions of
it was
Vader.
like his voice still hadn't broken, his ball still hadn't dropped. Like, he was still like a teenager, had to be braid and stuff like that. You know, it was...
it was the wee pigtail thing. So, but it was definitely the action of someone that's veering towards the dark side, or as a personality that you can at least understand his dark influences.
Yeah, aye, but. Then he eventually becomes sort of like, he becomes Darth Vader at the end of the movie, and he gets beat by Obi-Wan at the end, but I think that's still probably, I think it's the second best fight scene in the 9 movies, I think.
I think I know what you're going to say. Fight scene, well, and we'll wait until we get there. Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, I love the duel between Anakin and his master. I think it's absolutely amazing. There's a guy on YouTube who's called Shadowversity, and he's basically this medieval guy. He's hilarious, but he does these medieval videos, and he's done an analysis of the fight scene and like the sword choreography they put into that is actually, from a perspective, it's
Yeah.
believable. You know, it's like there's like the whole time when they're dueling, they've got their guard up. They're never just like, see the spins they do. They're not just aesthetic, you know, and like the kicks they do come in at, well, sometimes they come in at a reasonable time. Just the whole choreography, the background on
Mustafar.
Mustafar, there we go. I always forget how the place is called because it always looked different. Yeah, the background on Mustafar was terrific. I love everything about that, and also just the emotional charge that's happening. Like you feel this is a father fighting his son in that fight scene. I always felt that. I'm like, but the son that's like totally warped. I guess. Yeah, totally and utterly irredeemable. This is like a father trying to put his son out of his misery. You know, that's what I felt. Just immediately after force choking like the woman he loves, the woman he's done all this for. It was where you realise like, okay, totally unredeemable. This is now
you're like lost.
Vader.
You're lost now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's no going back.
Yeah, I actually really like the third movie, but I think that it was probably too late for the trilogy at that point. Like it was 2 movies of people hating it, and even though there was no Jar Jar in that film, even though there was that epic confrontation at the end and even with like Yoda and the Emperor. And
right.
Just to give a quick shout out, I actually think that Ewan McGregor kind of holds up the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy. Sorry, I think
in a huge way.
I actually like him better than I like Old Obi-Wan in the original trilogy. I think Ewan McGregor is like fantastic, and I'm so excited for his show that's going to come out. I'm definitely going to watch that. Binge that when it comes out.
People have basically said that like casting Ewan McGregor in the role of Obi-Wan is just like lightning in a bottle. You know, you couldn't find a more perfect actor. Yeah. Someone that's just like so. He's just so wise. He embodies this wise, thoughtful master role, you know.
But he also has these like quippy one-liners that are like so cheesy, but you can't help but like love them.
Brilliant.
Like when he jumps down to General Grievous and he's got that "hello there" line. It's like
hello there.
It's great. It's
perfect.
I honestly just love that character so much. That was why. To come on to like the sequel trilogy after, that was why I wanted him to be in like Rey's lineage, because I love that character so much. But yeah, so I think the third one kind of wraps up that trilogy well. But by that point, it's just too late. You know, the fans that were there for the original trilogy were done now. So that wrapped up that trilogy. And I think George Lucas did have plans to do the sequel trilogy. I think the plans were in the works. The plots for the movies had been sort of like thought of anyway. But then, of course, it got sold to Disney, who took over. Right. And Disney went and wiped out a lot of the expanded universe, or like the vast majority of it, which was another boot in the stones for the original fans, because I think they love the expanded universe.
The expanded universe was massive. There was hundreds of books, there was hundreds of comics, there was adaptations. There was like, it was a universe in itself, and it was very difficult for people to hear that no longer exists. Like I had several favourite Sith Lords, and all of a sudden they weren't canon.
I think you'll find a lot of those come back like later on.
They will.
There's a lot of that's still going to be canon.
Yeah, I think the Disney basically said that they're going to be drawing upon the pool what currently exists, but in order to build their stories, like they're just going to pick and choose what they make canon, so they don't need to navigate through this minefield of what already exists. So I understand it, but it's a shame, you know. It's a big shame. Like Revan, the Malak, and stuff like that. These amazing Sith characters that were introduced over the years, like in like the ancient days of the Empire. So many people had really latched onto them and were waiting for them to introduce into some mainline film, and to find out that that's a lot less likely to happen now was hard.
Yeah, I hadn't really interacted with a lot of the expanded universe. It was more just stuff that I'd read. Like if I'd seen something, like searched it online and got into like a Wikipedia rabbit hole, and I'd like read about expanded universe, like when I googled the rule of 2, and all of a sudden I was like going through all this like Sith lineage. So like I didn't interact with it that much, which is why I probably understand why I did it and even appreciate it, because it probably would be impossible to try and tell a story that fit into that canonical universe when there was so much there. So I kind of understand it, but I also understand why the people that liked that were upset with it, because they just kind of bought it and they were like, yeah, that doesn't exist now, like that's gone now.
Yeah, and like people had been like, this had been the hobby that drove them through life for 30, 40 years, you know. It was like what they thought about every day. Some of these people, some of the mega fans that watched this originally,
they were obsessed with it. Truly
obsessed. So that was that was a bold move for Disney to take, and also I think it was kind of the first rumbling that Disney were going to have this perspective of out with the old, in with the new, right?
Yeah. So we have this like prequel trilogy which George Lucas was at the helm for, and it came into a whole slew of problems because it undermined a lot of the stuff that happened in the original trilogy. I think that's kind of the thought process we're coming there. It's sort of touched a lot of things that shouldn't have been touched, essentially. Then Disney took over, and then in recent years, in the last 6 years or so, they've been releasing this sequel trilogy, which I think also has its problems. There's also been a lot of negative backlash towards it, but it's not, a lot of it isn't to do with like the decisions that were made and the plot and stuff like that. So they introduced this new character, and the Force Awakens. We're getting a bit of deja vu when it comes to the Force Awakens, because as I describe this story, you're going to be like, wait, we've seen this story.
I swear to God, this is the same fucking movie.
The Force Awakens like opens up on a sandy desert planet
Weird.
with a scavenger girl who's fighting for her survival, who has this strange power that she doesn't really know about, she can't really figure out. And then someone comes and like takes her away from this planet, and sort of she begins to learn about this power that she has, and then she joins the Resistance, and then she goes on to be one of the leaders of the Resistance, and they also blow up a big ship in that movie at the end.
And they fly around on a Millennium Falcon.
So we're basically, what we're saying is that Force Awakens is A New Hope. It's modernised A New Hope. It now has a female lead. It now has a black character in the movie, which are both good, to be honest. I actually quite like Rey, and I like Finn as well. They're really good. They're good characters. And I think it's worth noting that The Force Awakens was Disney and J.J. Abrams playing it safe when it came to like the new movie. They were like, okay, how can we get the original fans back in? And they were like, well, let's just do the first one again. And,
and
you know what? It wasn't bad. I don't think The Force Awakens was like bad at all.
Well, yeah, that's where we definitely, I know we have different opinions, because I, as you know, loved Force Awakens. Absolutely. I watched it in the cinema 4 times. You know, every single time I came back, and each time I loved it even more. Like, everything about that film was just perfect for me. You know, I wanted the Star Wars experience again. You know, I wanted to watch the same film, and I was also aware this is the first film. This is the first film of 3. You know, let's not worry here. Sure, some of it was a bit on the nose. You know, like Hux was literally Hitler. You know, stuff like that. It was there was overkill, and the whole concept of taking
let's hold on.
planet size.
This is like, it's really breaking up.
Base.
Hold on.
Oh shit!
So we're at 45 minutes in the recording. I'll take a note of that.
No, hang up and start again.
Yeah, you can do.
Yeah, okay. Got you back.
Okay, so do you want to start again at...
This is, I know where... Yeah, I know where...
Start again, like, at the Force Awakens bit.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'll give a small countdown as well, so I know when to start back. 3, 2, 1. So, I know that you and I are definitely going to... I have a different opinion than you on Force Awakens, because I absolutely loved The Force Awakens when it came out. Like, I watched it 4 times in the cinema. I kept coming back for it even more. Everything was just great, because I wanted the Star Wars story again. You know, I was there for that. I know you're saying that they played it safe. That was exactly what I wanted them to do. It's because, as you said, it brings in the old fans. It gives them what they want. And just the simple act of modernising a formula that we already know, for me, was brilliant. Like, see the sound effects. Oh my God. See the graphics of like seeing these fucking Star Destroyers firing through his face and stuff like that. The very first scene where you see, you know, our lone hero that always felt like they've wanted more in life. She's the scene of her like going through the old Star Destroyer, and you're realizing that she has these skills that she picks up along the way, and like this is where she's learned about these Imperial systems. And then later on in the film, that comes in, she then jacks into one of these systems, and she's using her knowledge. Oh, I thought that was a brilliant film. The sound of the lightsabers, Kylo Ren. Oh, you know, and like there was so many analogies, like Kylo Ren was obviously kind of like kind of like Darth Maul, I suppose. He kind of had a lot.
He
of
was
Vader.
Vader.
Vibes. Yeah, he was Vader. Right, exactly.
It was
But
literally the same character. It was this guy
Oh
who
no!
he like. Kylo Ren is literally a villain in a mask who comes across as this like super powerful like Sith Lord, and the movie doesn't even like hide that it's the same character because he's literally worshipping Vader in the movie. Like the movie doesn't even try and hide that he's like just the same character. I'm not saying that's bad, but
No, I have to disagree with
it
you,
doesn't
man. I
hide
thought
that.
he was extremely. He was his own character. Like because like the fact that he worshipped Vader, Vader would have worshipped no one. Vader was, so like I actually thought that Kylo Ren in the first movie was a bit petulant. He was a bit childish in the way he acted. He was like lashing out, and you got the impression that's where his force powers originated. Like he doesn't control the dark side of the force. He's letting it control him. And like in the fight with Rey, I always got the impression like he's just after being shot with the Wookiee blaster, and like he's dangling this fucking sword around. He keeps punching his wound. I thought that was him trying to draw upon the dark side.
Yeah,
And, like I thought this was something that Vader would never ever do. So I thought it was a good parallel to the Vader character, but I thought they were taking it in a completely different direction.
Sure.
So that was great. I walked out of that film really really happy.
that was. I think I might have like misspoke a little bit when I said that, but like, yeah, it's like a parallel. They're not hiding the parallel between him and Vader, but there's no doubt that he does have his own story. And I think now that it's all said and done, I think Kylo Ren is my favourite character in the entire 9 movies. To be honest, I think he's the best character now that it's all been like finished.
It's a hard call.
But yeah, but I think
Obi-Wan about
like the Force Awakens is like so obviously just a rehash of A New Hope, and see when even the original trilogy fans, when they came out of that movie, I felt like the reaction was, yeah, it was the same movie, but that's okay. Like nobody was like bothered about it. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been waiting for 40 years now. That I just wanted to see A New Hope again.
Yeah, like it sounds like you
modernised.
came out of that theater and you were like, that was like a 10 out of 10 fantastic movie.
Oh yeah,
I think I came out of The Force Awakens, and there definitely were a few moments in the film where I was like, "Oh, Star Wars is kind of back." Where like, see the bit where she pulls the lightsaber out of the snow and the music,
Right.
the music blares. That's a moment for me as well where I feel my eyes like kind of watering a bit, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my god, Star Wars is like.
Yeah, there was a couple films, couple times where I was kind of like getting a tear. See just the scene where they just like pan around and you see the Falcon. It's like, that old junk ship over there, we'll catch it. You see the Falcon? I was like, it's the Falcon.
That was terrible. That was absolutely.
Yeah. Oh no, honestly, there's so many scenes in that in the first film where I just thought were really, really such good fan service. Good fan service.
That was the whole movie was fan service. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean it was, yeah, definitely. But at the end of the day, like people wanted that. They knew people wanted that, and it was safe. And as I was kind of wanting to highlight, like I was acutely aware that this was going to be the first film in a trilogy. That's see the first film.
Yeah,
that's okay.
So I think that comes to probably my last point about that movie, and it's that it was the same as A New Hope, but it kind of like did its job, and it did it in the safest way possible. And that was people came out of that and they were like, okay, this might be a good trilogy. I'm now. That's reignited my excitement for Star Wars, kind of thing.
Definitely.
Which it did for me as well. I came out of that movie, and I was thinking to myself, maybe that was like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Really enjoyed it. I was excited for the next thing, but I definitely would have liked a different story. I would have liked
I get what you mean.
something new. I think that's one of the negative things I see about things these days. So, like when I'm talking about content that's like rehashed all the time, it's like. I don't want to be watching the same stuff, like all these YouTube recommendations, and it's all like just re-uploads of somebody else's stuff. I'm like, I don't want to be doing that. I want you guys to be telling me new stories, and that was probably why I didn't enjoy it as much as you did. And like, I'd rather there was a new story to tell. Like, I like that prequels was like a different story, but I didn't like that they touched things that were sacred from the original trilogy.
Yeah, as much as like there's absolutely no denying the fact that it was like a shameless rehash of the original movie, we're completely aware when you're watching it though that this is going to end up in a different place, I think, because like you are introduced to, well, maybe that's not true. I don't know. I'm looking back and I'm thinking about the concepts that made me excited about the second film. Like I remember hearing about the Knights of Ren, and you're like, the Knights of Ren, who are they? Oh my god, I cannot wait until they introduce them. You kind of had hints about Rey's lineage, and you're like, oh my god, who's Rey's parents going to be? That's absolutely incredible. Snoke is just like briefly mention, you're like, is he actually that size? You know, is he gonna have a lightsaber? It's like the size of a building.
Is he gonna have a 40-foot lightsaber?
Yeah, I was so hyped for it, learning about these things, and like it was a really, really slow start, you know, because at the end of the day we knew where it was going to head. You knew they were going to blow up the Death Star 3.0, but they'd left enough breadcrumbs.
That was another thing about it, where we came back to that movie and it was like the Death Star in the original trilogy could blow up planets, so they couldn't have weapons that were that good in the prequel trilogy because that was before it, obviously. But now we're in the sequel trilogy, it's like, yeah, we have a whole planet which can blow up loads of planets, and it's like it's like we don't have to do this. Like planet destroying weapon was like fine, and it's like they've just like exponentially upped the ante for no reason whatsoever to falsely tell you that things might go even worse now. Like we're not not destroying any planets that you guys love, but there are planets out there that blew up. Trust us, you know. It's
That actually was you're right. Worth mentioning. The one thing about that film that really did piss me off was like they just destroyed 5 ecumenopolis worlds. Like, you know, there's like trillions of people just died in a blast of a second, and like it wasn't acknowledged. It wasn't.
There's no reason for it
whatsoever. No, it wasn't. It was just like to try and falsely make you think these guys are serious, you know. But at the end of the day, you didn't care because this has been done already.
It was blown up in 10 minutes, so it didn't really matter, did it?
No, exactly. You're totally right there. That was a really strange direction to take that. They had absolutely no way of really instilling any degree of fear on the audience, or you know, is this going to go wrong? It's like we knew it wasn't going to go wrong. We know the ending of this film.
Yeah,
literally.
Then it transitions into the next movie, which we're going to have so much disagreement on. It's unreal, because this is my favourite movie of the 9. The Last Jedi, I think, is the best movie out of all 3 of the trilogies. I think it comes across to me like Rian Johnson doesn't like Star Wars in the movie, but the story that he told in the movie, I feel like there's several things that he does in the movie, and they're all like cardinal sins that have like happened before. Like he kind of destroys Luke's character a little bit.
Kind of.
Yeah. So he kind of takes Luke and he makes him a little bit of a joke, and we've seen in the prequel trilogy that fans don't like that. You know, like no touchy Darth Vader, and like
and Luke was Darth Vader times 10, right? The way the way that people imagine.
I think it was probably just as bad as Darth Vader for him to like do that. To show him literally milking this animal on the planet and like drinking it straight out and like looking at her as this like dribbles down his beard. It's like. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of moments in that movie where I feel like Rian Johnson is just turning to the camera and going, "Fuck you guys!" Nothing is sacred in these movies. So I think
Ray's asking about her parents. You know,
it seems like he's just trying to piss people off in that movie. At points,
J.J. Abrams off.
Well, he's just
maybe there's a feud there.
He's trying to subvert something in that movie. Having said that, though, I think that the reason that I love the sequel trilogy so much is because of the dynamic between Rey and Kylo Ren. I think those two characters and the way they interact and the relationship that they have is probably the best and most believable and most realistic way that two characters would interact out of the entire franchise. And that movie is basically all about their connection. And I think it's fantastic. The whole every scene they interact is just brilliant. I think it's just phenomenal.
I think so. Right. I'm not sure if I agree with you there.
Well, why do you dislike it? What's wrong with the movie for you?
Well, the biggest problem I have with the movie in general, I guess we can talk about like the relationship in a bit, but the problem I have with the movie is the severe lack of continuity. It's like, you know how I just mentioned the thing I loved about Force Awakens was these breadcrumbs that are trickled throughout the film. And it's like, setting us up for something here, you know. And then Rian Johnson came along and systematically squelched every single one of those thoughts that I had. And so Snoke, Jesus fucking Christ, what they did to Snoke was unforgivable, you know. Like setting up an enemy like that to kill them because like he was like imagining the wrong person's perspective or some bullshit. I don't even understand what that was all about looking back. But you cannot set up an enemy like that and kill them with such little payoff just because it subverts the audience expectations. That's not good enough, you know.
Yeah, Snoke was kind of like he was kind of behind the scenes a little bit in the Force Awakens in the seventh movie, and I guess it was kind of like he did
He was
seem.
supposed to be Emperor 2.0 to me.
Yeah, I guess so, but I think like looking back, the movie really isn't about Snoke. The movies like really aren't about Snoke like at all.
Looking back, certainly not.
Not
No,
even, but
but
even like the Force Awakens, like Snoke's like just a background character. He's literally a hologram in that film. And then
yeah, oh, it
when it
was.
comes to the Last Jedi, like the whole movie's been about Rey and Kylo Ren, and he's just kind of like there at the end. And Kylo Ren like killing Snoke also like completely solidifies their relationship for a minute. It's not just like he doesn't just Ryan Johnson doesn't just kill Snoke off for like no reason. Like there's like a good like 5 minutes there in the movie, 10 minutes in the movie where they are like one. They're like their relationship is completely solid. And
Sure.
in a way, his character sort of serves the purpose in the trilogy in that it completely like connects them and it gives them a like oh we could do this together. Like we can be together here. I mean,
Yeah, no,
obviously it goes away from that right after, but like I
yeah,
think it serves its purpose in that sense.
no. You're right. It does. The scene does have a reason. I understand why he did it. It's because there's obviously something you're leading up to, and there's the payoff of, as you said, their relationship tightening. But like he did, like the last few words in the first movie are he will like Kylo Ren return to me and I'll resume his training. That was literally what we were told is going to happen in the next movie, you know, and we're like, shit, he's going to go back to basics. And like, see, now I thought to myself, like, Kylo Ren, he was just kind of like inexperienced Force user. He was like really emotionally immature and stuff like that. There were these things, these themes that were kind of hinted at, and I was like, okay, we're going to see Kylo Ren like double down now, and he's going to turn back to his master. We're going to learn a little bit there and go down those scenes. That wasn't even acknowledged.
Sure.
That wasn't.
In that movie, I guess you're right in the sense that he did say, like, bring him back and I'm going to resume his training. And then the second movie kind of starts off with them kind of like talking about that, but then he doesn't actually give him any training.
No, yeah, exactly. So it's one of those. It's just another discontinuity thing where that I didn't like. That I felt that these movies were so obviously written by people with different uh, end goals. I
Yeah,
suppose.
so I think you've hit something quite important there in the sense that these three movies were originally supposed to be done by different people. So J.J. Abrams did the first one, Ryan Johnson did the second one, and it was supposed to be Colin Trevorrow that did the last one,
Right.
which they eventually canned because they knew it was getting bad. So it was almost like these three different directors, these three different writers had completely different visions for the movie. Like it was like J.J. Abrams wanted Rey to be someone. It was like he set up in that movie that she had a lineage, and Ryan Johnson was kind of like, well, that doesn't have to be the case. And we spoke about this before, but I think, you know, even though you dislike this movie the most, I think that the whole trilogy would have been better if it had all been done by Ryan Johnson, like the whole thing.
I think the trilogy would have undoubtedly been better if there was one director.
Yes.
I actually agree with you. I think Ryan Johnson is better than J.J. Abrams. Like J.J. Abrams, he's really, really good at fan service. He's really, really good at explosions. He's really, really good at moving things quickly and lots of action. I think Ryan Johnson probably told a more intelligent film. I think I really do think that. My problem is the fact that that's not what happened.
Sure.
You know, like that, and that's just unforgivable to me. Like, because I cannot look at this film on its own. I have to look at it relative to the first and the third of the trilogy. And when I look at it that way, I just don't see how that possibly. There's no so many like there's like each movie has its own like theme, you know, and there's it seems like there's very little overarching, and I like that's what we really liked about the trilogy was like the overarching transition of Anakin turning into Vader. Like it has its flaws. I felt
But
that
it has one vision, you know.
right,
Yeah.
and that was really muddled.
I think we're now touching
in
on to the
sequels.
second reason as to why people don't like these movies, and especially with the sequel trilogy, it's that it doesn't have a clear direction. And it, you know, when you start these stories, I remember reading a story once about how when J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter, she like wrote it, and she had like the end and the beginning and like all the points down before she actually started writing the franchise, and that's like a good way to do it. I think they did The Force Awakens and they didn't really have any idea
Yeah.
where it was going to go. Like
Oh
they
yeah.
wrote that movie and they were like, I guess he'll do something in the next movie. And then once that movie came out, it was like, well, this was not what you set this up to be like at all.
Yeah. No, I
This
think
did not
that's
follow the first movie.
no. I think that actually happened with these movies. Is they wrote them one at a time.
Yeah.
They didn't when they were starting with the first movie think about how they wanted to end Star Wars forever. They thought we'll start and we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
You know? And we're talking about Star Wars here, something that's so holy that you cannot possibly expect to meander through this and come up with a good story. There's no way, right?
I think there's another element of that there that we kind of touched on last week, and it's that the audience aren't stupid. You know, we spoke about last week in messaging and media and about how some of these ideologies that they try and force upon you are pandering to the viewers. They're almost talking to you about these issues like you're not smart enough to know what you should think yourself. And
Yeah.
the Star Wars movies came out, and I guess they didn't think the audience would realise there wasn't a direction here. So when they brought these movies out and they were like, oh, it'll be fine, we'll just release the second movie and people will enjoy it. But actually the audience, it was quite obvious to the audience that they'd been written
That
by
they'd
different
no
people
direction.
and they had no overarching story and they were just making it up as they were going along. So when I say that I wish Ryan Johnson did all three of them, I wish that the second movie I think is the best one. As it stands on its own, I love it. I think it's the best of the franchise. And I think if he did all three of them and his vision was sort of incorporated out within all three movies, within the trilogy, it would have been fantastic. And it would have been different as well. Because he definitely wanted to do different in that second movie. And you can tell that more than anything else.
Yeah. A relatively big theme of a second movie, I think, was forgetting the past and embracing the new. You know? There's definitely, and there was probably more messaging in it than other films. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. The second film, was that the one with the infamous scene on the casino planet where you have like,
Yes.
oh, these are arms dealers, but they sell to both sides. Oh, there's nuance here. It's like, you don't fucking say. There's like, they're treating the audience like absolute fools, you know. It was like, and it was as if it was this mind-blowing revelation that as much as we have the dark side and the light side, there's shades of grey, guys. And like, it was definitely a different direction they took it in. I appreciate the thought. I think maybe if there was some sort of overarching theme going on here, it could have been achieved better.
So that kind of touches on what we spoke about last week as well, where the audience just doesn't want to be spoken down to like that. Like it also has this, like you're saying, that second movie does have that ideology thing where it's like, oh, there's nuance in what's going on here, and the audience are kind of like, yeah, we know
that.
It's
right.
Like it was you that didn't know that in the first movie. Like it's like J.J. Abrams didn't know that. Like we knew all along.
Yeah. It was a kind of clumsy, I suppose, in how it was implemented.
So we have that second movie, which kind of I think stands pretty well on its own. Obviously doesn't continue the first movie, but I still enjoy it regardless. And then we kind of come to the third movie. Now by this stage, it's lost all direction. You know, there's this train is going somewhere.
Oh, it's a wreck now.
You know, we don't know what the final destination is, but we better get there fast because this movie's got to go out in 2 years. So once the second movie comes out, they say, right, Colin Trevorrow, you're off. We can't do this. We can't have a third person involved. We'll get JJ back in. He'll revitalise this franchise once again. You know, people liked him the first time. They'll like him the second time. That movie had no direction whatsoever. Now, I rewatched it a couple of weeks ago, and it actually wasn't as bad as I remember it being in the cinema. But my God, that movie tumbles on and doesn't really do anything.
No, it's just an entire movie of MacGuffins, one after the other, and reasons to move to the next location without much clear idea of what's going on here. They knew he wanted the Emperor. You know, like 3 weeks into writing, some Disney exec went, BAM! Sat Palpatine. We're bringing him back. You know, like, people are going to fucking love that. So what do? They immediately release a teaser trailer showing the Emperor. It's like, oh.
So, and you know that I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and that I was always going to see these movies, and you know that we love Star Wars.
There's no doubt, yeah.
One of the things about media these days is I fucking hate the trailers. I hate them. And they show too much of the movie. They're far too long. They basically tell you the entire plot. So I've actually just stopped watching trailers for movies that I'm looking forward to and that I'm going to see at cinema. So I hadn't seen this trailer that Palpatine was back. I'd avoided all spoilers. I had never seen a trailer. Everybody knows that I don't watch trailers, so no one posts in my group chats, anything like that. And then I sat down in the cinema, and the scroll told me that Palpatine was back. It was the first line in the text at the beginning of the movie. It was like, the dead speak. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't. I was like, just sitting
In a
there.
good way or a bad way?
No, bad. Horrible.
Good.
Horrific.
Good.
Like,
Good.
why did that have to be in the text? Why couldn't they have just made that the first 5 minutes of the movie?
Why couldn't that have been a scene? You know, why? Because
It
would have been
was.
great. I think
It was a scene,
yeah,
but they told you before it anyway.
right. Well, okay, I see. Yeah, it should have been a standalone scene. Yeah, I don't understand what was going on there. Like, obviously, releasing that as a trailer was a marketing move, and you would have thought that releasing that type of information would be a massive bomb to drop in the movie. You know, just in case people hadn't seen the trailer, in case people had deliberately avoided spoilers and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But no, the
No.
first text in the movie.
Like,
the
it's
Emperor is
like
back.
the trailers are no longer like a hint at the movie anymore. They're actually now a part
They're
of
a
watching
blurb.
it. It's,
Yeah.
it-
Oh, yeah.
It's,
Oh,
it's
right,
kind of
right,
like, if you
okay.
don't watch this trailer, like, it's going to be a
You'll be
shit
missing
review on
out.
the film, so you're going to have to
Mhm.
watch it. And it's like, that annoyed me. Like, so straight off the bat, I was in a bad mood when this movie like started, and then
Sure.
like we say, the movie just like tumbles through itself. It goes from one scene to the next. It doesn't really know what it's doing, and I think you can tell it's a bad movie when you sit there and you think everything that I thought could have happened in that movie would have been cooler than what happened in that movie. Like, they tease like the main character from this trilogy, Rey, they tease her going to the dark side and Kylo Ren kind of coming back, and like about halfway through the movie I was like, wow, if she goes to the dark side and he goes to the light side and they fight at the end, I'm going to be fucking impressed. But of course it never happened, you know? It was like, oh, she might be bad, but no, she's not bad.
She was never going to be bad. No.
No. So the movie just kind of tumbles through itself, and about halfway through, it's like, now we don't just have one machine that can destroy 5 planets. We have 1,000 machines that can each destroy 5 planets, and it's like, fucking hell, man.
And we've built them all underground.
They're all ready to go today. And it's like, right,
Yeah.
I guess so. And then it's like, oh, Snoke, he was a clone. The Emperor. Remember the Emperor?
yeah.
He's
Oh.
back. Oh, God, it was... Yeah, no, I'm getting pretty annoyed about it. When I watched it a couple of weeks
It
ago...
does frustrate me.
When I watched it a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't as bad as I'm talking about it just now. But, like... Yeah, even in that movie, like, the relationship between, like, Rey and Kylo Ren, I think is, like, still good. I'm still enjoying the dynamic in that movie as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's probably one of the things that keeps it going, actually.
Yeah.
Would be that. It's probably... Because I think that probably comes down to one of the things. It's one of the few consistent driving points throughout these movies is Rey and Kylo Ren, and this is where they introduced the whole concept of the dyad, and that's something that I think would have been brilliant if they'd thought about that during the Force Awakens. You know, see
Sure.
if that was something that they'd like something that they'd intended, and like bringing out the bag at the end of the day. That would have been actually quite cool. But to me, it felt pretty opposite. That it was pretty contrived. You know, I didn't believe it.
To me, I agree with you that they probably did think of that, you know, when they were writing the third movie. They never thought about that at the beginning. Having said that, I also thought that the dyad, so I should probably say that a dyad in the Force is like when two Force beings are like connected in some way, and they have like this dynamic relationship throughout, and it sort of gives it a name, I guess. It gives it like they actually are connected in some way other than their personalities, and I think it was actually quite a natural fit-in to the movie. Like, if someone had told me that had been in the war room when they were first thinking of the Force Awakens, like a dyad in the Force, I'd have been like, okay, maybe I could believe that. I could maybe believe that this was thought of before the trilogy happened. So it wasn't too bad.
It wasn't the worst thing. No, it wasn't crammed in there. You're right. It fit. It fit with what they were going with, and like the whole them like having like the Force Skype thing where they were able to talk to each other. It was like, oh, that was actually Force Dad. It's like, oh, right, okay, yeah. It wasn't Snoke. We kind of thought it was Snoke.
Like,
but
while the movies were like down at that point, like seeing that, I brought it back up. I was like, okay, right, I can get on board with that. That's kind of cool. Like, these two people do actually have this connection. And then, of course, Kylo Ren kind of goes in this like redemption story towards the end, which I think the scene with him and Harrison Ford when he sort of like talks to the ghost of his father, I think that's really good. I really
Yeah.
enjoy it when he throws the lightsaber off into the water and stuff like that. And then when he gets to Exegol and tries to like catch up with Rey, and he's like, I feel like his character's like totally different. He is like, and I actually really like Adam Driver. I think he's a phenomenal actor. I've watched him in a few other things now, and he's really, really good. And he really shows the transition. Like, there's a bit where he jumps off onto a ledge and he slams into it, and he's like, "Oh!" And it's like, "Oh, this guy's like a human now. Like, he's no longer this."
He becomes quippy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
After that moment, it's a transition.
Yeah,
definitely,
and there's
isn't
like
it?
that bit where she's got a lightsaber in her hand and she's in front of the Emperor, but she feels he's not got one, so she passes him the lightsaber through the Force, and like, but he's surrounded by the Knights of Ren, and he kind of like pulls out the lightsaber and he kind of goes. Like, it's kind of like it's a Han Solo, like, I'm gonna kill everyone now, and it's like now I've got a sword, like I'm a cocky fuck now, like I'm a flyboy as well, and it's like the transition from his character being evil, like it was so clear at that point in the movie that he was no longer Kylo Ren, he was now like Ben Solo again, which I think is a credit to Adam Driver. I think he portrayed that excellently.
I agree actually. His progression through the movies was really, really good. I like it a lot. He starts as this like kind of like angry Force user that's just like stuck up in the past and thinking about his idolizing this literally this character from decades past. It's long dead. He has this old melted fucking helmet that he salivates over every single day, and then he starts realizing a little bit that he could be more. He starts thinking about his position relative to Snoke. I can only presume that he thought Snoke wasn't a clone, I guess. I don't know how that works. And it kind of goes to his position, and it's almost as if Rey, she's the one that's kind of pulling him along this revelation, right? It's just like he would have been stuck there if Rey wasn't in the picture. And like through her interactions with Rey, I guess that's got something to do with the dyad. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, Adam Driver was phenomenal.
Yeah, see, every time he brings a movie out now, I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely watching that, because I watched him in Marriage Story as well. Shortly after, I watched Rise of Skywalker, and I didn't particularly enjoy the movie that much, but he's phenomenal in it.
Really,
yeah, he's like really, really good. So that trilogy in general, I think has the potential to be so good if they thought about this dyad in the Force and they'd had this overarching goal of like her redeeming him. And to be honest, I would have loved it if she'd been a Sith at the end. Like if they'd like flipped sides and like maybe he had to kill her, but he was like kind of still exiled at the end because he was Kylo Ren. Like, but he saves the day, but then kind of goes off on his own kind of thing. That'd have been a great ending. Like everything about the Rise of Skywalker, I'm like, if they'd done this, it'd have been so cool, and they did none of it. So there's like there's these characters, and even like Finn. I think Finn's like a really good character as well. I really quite like him. I like Poe Dameron.
He was done a disservice in the final movie, I thought.
Yeah. I quite like Poe Dameron. I quite like Kylo Ren, and I like Rey, and all the sort of the ways that they interact and their relationships are like really, really good. But the movie, you're right, the movies just have no continuity. They have no idea what they're doing. So in a way, those movies are just like, they know Star Wars is going to make money, and Disney have just been like, well, let's just pump this out like as fast as we can. Like, we're going to have a movie in 2016, 2018, 2020. Like, get them going, kind of thing.
We can serve them anything, and we will make $1 billion. You know, it doesn't matter the movie that we pump out at the end of the day. Each one of these is going to make the ballpark region of £1 billion, just because of the name.
The sequel trilogy also has the problem that it's very clear that Disney are trying to like merchandise it as they're going. Like every new stormtrooper that's introduced is like a toy, if you know what I mean. Like
new colours and stuff.
And like,
like that.
in the Rise of Skywalker, they introduced like jetpackers, like jetpack stormtroopers, and like I think C-3PO just plain out says, "Oh, they have jetpacks now," and it's like, This is just a toy. This is just literally a toy that you're going to put on a shelf, and it totally just rips the arse out of how much money it's going to try and make out of these things.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like, you have, in the first movie, you have BB-8, the merch. In the second movie, you have those weird little creatures on the island, Luke's island, whatever the fuck they are. That's the merch 2.0. And in the third movie, you have that stupid little droid that says like one word. I can't. The droid that belonged to the old the bounty hunter.
They basically introduce a bunch of races
characters
and droids and characters just to put them in a box and put them on a shelf,
blatantly,
so that 5-year-olds will want to, so that a 5-year-old will walk into a Disney store, point at the shelf and like start crying when their parents won't buy them. You know,
Yeah,
it's so clear
and
that they're doing that.
The tracks from it, I think.
So we have the original trilogy, which seems to be universally loved, and it seems to be universally loved because it was like unique. It was a new story. It was quite niche for its time, ahead of its time maybe in terms of sci-fi.
I think so. Yeah, and also the special effects were extremely cutting edge.
Sure, yeah, it had that going for it as well. And it had like a relatable story with a relatable character who was overcoming something that I think people will relate to in like the Empire and like the figurehead of the Empire, and that person having the power to do so. But then you have this like prequel trilogy, which takes all of the unique, cool things about the original trilogy and tries to explain them to you, which just does not work at all. It just can't do it justice. Like origin stories like that, like going back after the fact, just can't do it justice. And I think that's just a cardinal sin, I think, for like movie making.
Yeah. Is it like you said from the very, very beginning of the discussion? They started on the wrong foot, you know, and there's no way they could have avoided that.
Yeah, it paints, you know, I think from the original trilogy, it takes Darth Vader, which is probably the character that resonated with fans the most. Like he was the takeaway from the original trilogy. You know, his villain, his character dynamic, his redemption story, him becoming Luke's father, like all of these things. That was what came away from that original trilogy. And then George Lucas was like, let's make 3 more movies of that. And it was like, well, that's a mistake. And you're showing him as a whiny kid. You're showing him as a booty teenager. And then eventually you're showcasing him as a badass Jedi. But like, by that point, it's kind of finished.
Yeah, right.
So I think from that, we're saying, don't try to take away the mystery. That's probably one of the worst things you can do in these movies, is to take something that's kind of mysterious, because the thing that people are imagining is always going to be cooler than the thing that you put in front of them.
Always, yeah. I think also in terms of the movie, that was also where they started introducing the joke characters as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it started
trying to be a bit comedic, which was probably a bad idea for it as well. It's not really there is a lot of comedy in those movies that it does land, like Hugh McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right, exactly. The quips are brilliant, but the ridiculousness, it felt like it didn't match those movies.
I don't even know what he's like trying to show with the Gungans. Like, what is he?
Right.
Why are they here? Like, what is it about them?
Yeah, that was a completely random one, and that's not even like merch, just because no one wanted to buy Jar Jar Binks after that movie. Everyone just seemed to hate him.
Yeah, I think universally. And then you had this sequel trilogy, which is very clear to me is just a cash grab. It's just Disney buying something and then churning out movies without any real thought as to what they're doing with them. And I don't know how many more movies there can be like that before people just stop going to see Star Wars, before you just like... Because the fan base is so dedicated that they've stuck around now for what they probably feel like is 20 years and 6 movies of bad content.
Right.
And they're like still there. You know, the Star Wars fans, they're probably still going to go see the next movie when it comes out.
Yeah.
So you have this like hyper dedicated fan base that you're like on the verge of turning away, I think. You know?
I don't know. So I think Disney, I think they've learned from the mistakes, and I thought they're going to think what they're going to do is they're going to leave it 5 years and bring out a new movie. Maybe another 2 movies or 3. And then they'll wait another couple of years. And they'll know that people keep crawling back. See, as long as you give them a little bit of time to get them like salivating for more Star Wars, I don't see how it will end. Like and Disney will never stop making these movies while they turn a profit.
But do you think they will get better at making them though? Will the next attempt be better than that trilogy?
It really comes down to who they hire to write these movies, right? I think that's so important, and the general planning that goes on behind the scenes. I think we basically agreed with the sequels that it was poor management and planning and just lack of cohesion.
It felt like those movies were more about turning a coin than they were about telling a good Star Wars story.
I don't know if that can possibly change. like I can only imagine what it's like to write these movies and the amount of studio pressure you must have in order to tick all of the extreme number of boxes that you need to just to go back. Like we both agree it would have been terrific, amazing if Rey ended up turning to the dark side, but that was never ever going to happen. Disney would not have let that happen because Rey is the good one, you know, and there would have been backlash if they'd ever changed that or let that happen.
The backlash would have been
saying,
horrible, especially because she's a female. They made
that's
a
where the
female
backlash would have
lead
come from.
in a series that was predominantly male led, and
Mm-hmm.
if they turned her to the dark side and killed her, that'd have been like, no.
Yeah. These are the things that Disney is acutely aware of. They're balancing risk, and when it comes to balancing risk with movies, you have to be less daring. So it's hard. Like I know. I don't know whether you just want to talk about the main series or not, but we can briefly talk about Rogue One. And I loved Rogue One.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think these movies as well, and we've just spoken about the Rogue One's one of the spin-off movies that Disney done, sort of in the in-between years between the sequel trilogy, and Rogue One kind of gives me less hope that they will learn from their mistakes, because it takes another element of mystery from the original trilogy and like explains it to you. You know what I mean? Like they've obviously seen that the prequel trilogy took Darth Vader and explained away all the mystery, and people hated it. And I don't think people hated Rogue One, but I personally didn't like it because I just thought it was a bit unnecessary, like as a whole, as the movie.
Yeah, I know. Get what you mean. No, I understand, but I think there was also a lot of people that liked it because it was different. It was a different Star Wars film, you know, and it was taking it a new direction, and I can only hope that that's at least what they latch on to. I agree with you, though, that they seem to be totally obsessed on taking things that are already established in the canon, have an air of mystery, and then just destroying it on screen, you know, like totally removing all of the mystery there. And like that's the thing, that like Star Wars is a universe that has existed in universe for like tens of thousands of years. We're looking at stories about the Republic. There's such a thing as an ancient Republic which existed millennia before this one, and there were still Jedi and there were still Sith. Like, what's stopping these guys just completely starting a new setting,
new stories? Yeah,
right, from new interesting stories. You still can have the things that make it Star Wars. You can still have spaceships. You don't need to like make this some techno-barbarian society. They seem to be, it seems they have a problem with maximizing the likely minimizing the risk of these films by taking things there's already public interest in.
Yeah, that was the thought I was
screwing
coming to.
it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was kind of coming to the realization that they can do a story thousands of years in the past, and they probably will eventually, but right now they're like, we can make more money doing this thing. So it definitely seems like the sequel trilogy and all that came with it in the Disney era are more about turning a coin, and it's pretty obvious because the story doesn't have any continuity. There's nothing new about it. There's nothing groundbreaking. It was a rehash of the old one. They didn't really know what they were going to do for the next two movies. They just announced them, you know. And I think the audience is like aware of these things. They might not be aware why they have a negative reaction, but they're aware.
They know if they liked it or not.
They're aware that
right.
it's going on. Maybe not on which level that is happening, but they know something bad is happening, and they come out of the movie unhappy because of it.
Yeah, and they don't go back to see it again. You know, these are the things that hit the bottom line, and we just have to hope that Disney becomes aware. Like I think, I'm pretty sure the films did go down. Like I'm pretty sure the Force Awakens did make the most profit, and then it went down after there. So like they have to see that in terms of the bottom line, that the formula they're following, hopefully, isn't optimal.
Yeah, it's like get people excited for a good movie, make more money. Like, don't think about the sequels after that and still release them, make less money. And it's like, surely they see that, surely.
We're talking about like hundreds of millions of pounds in difference in these movies,
Exactly.
you know. So this is only like, you know, 10 or 20% of what they're making, but it's still enough money that you really hope there has to be changes made. Unfortunately, I don't think either of us have watched the Disney show which they've introduced called Mandalorian, right?
No.
I've not. No, right, okay. Well, I've heard more positive reviews about that, but well, yeah, obviously I can't actually comment on it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I probably should watch it, but again, like I said before, the thing that I resonate with Star Wars is more about the Jedi and the
It's the
Sith,
Force, right?
which is why the
Yeah.
Mandalorian never really got me too excited. But I will watch it in the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of turned me off from it initially.
I see what you mean. Mm-hmm.
So, having spoke about that, I spoke about Star Wars in some detail. How do you keep your fans happy then? What do you do to keep your fans happy in your story? Because there are franchises that do it. We touched on Harry Potter earlier. Fans of Harry Potter were super happy the whole time. You know, I don't remember people reading books 6 and 7 and being like, "Well, that was shit. That was a cash grab," or like there was no idea what she was doing there. You know?
Yeah, I guess a major theme which we would have talked about with the sequels, I think, has to do with like not talking down to the audience. I think that's so important. That's one of those like subliminal ones that people don't even realize is happening. If you treat the audience with a bit of respect, then they will appreciate the movie more. And much more fundamentally than that, the audience can tell if you're planning this as you go along. They might not be able to, they might not say to themselves, they don't have a clue what they're going on here, but they'll walk away from the movie with a worse opinion. So, as much as a no-brainer it might seem, plan out your whole fucking film before you start releasing them.
Yeah, so, like Disney released those 3 movies banking on the fact that people would just go and see Star Wars. You know, they wouldn't. It wouldn't matter. They would just go and see the movies regardless.
Extreme pessimism.
Yeah, they like took that risk, and then it's totally backfired for them. I think when you think about the amazing franchises that are out there, I think about stories like the original Star Wars, like The Matrix, like Harry Potter. I'm looking at these franchises, and they're like, you know, they're not even totally out there. You know, like Star Wars originally, it wasn't a completely unique story. You know, it was good, but it wasn't totally changing the system. And Harry Potter,
I think that's what you mean.
Harry Potter was the same, where it was like it's the same kind of story as Star Wars, just in a fantasy setting as opposed to a sci-fi setting. You know, where it's like someone comes in, tells them he's special, and it's like this the same formula. It doesn't even take reinventing the wheel. It just takes having a little bit of like vision, and you're right, like respecting the audience's time a little bit, like not telling them what to think and not hoping they don't realize something. You know, that's
Right.
probably the worst one, where it's like, if you're telling them what to think, at least you've thought about it. If you're
Sure.
hoping they don't realize something, that's just something that you haven't thought about, you know? So it's like a step even before the messaging. It's like, oh well, we hope people will just sit down and they enjoy this movie, and it's like, that's not really how it works. Like having
No.
you need to have like a clear goal of where this is like going before it starts. And you know, we know it's Hollywood. We know there is like risk involved. So the first movie kind of has to stand alone. That's kind of how trilogies work, because it might not get funded for a second one,
Right.
and if it doesn't, you can't have the story not ended. So the first one kind of stands on its own, and then you have the sequel, and then the finale of the trilogy. But at least maybe have some idea of how you would extend the story afterwards, like how you would come back. You know, just
For God's sake, yeah.
yeah, like just don't waste people's time. That's probably one of the biggest ones. These movies like
Yeah.
waste people's time, and people realize they don't know what they're realizing, but they know it's bad.
Yeah, yeah. I that's what's so disappointing in this, is that the thing they were talking about seems obvious. It seems truly obvious, but we're talking about Star Wars here, and it didn't happen. You know, that's why it's so upsetting, because this is something that is so holy in people's minds. You know, and they took this and just took it for an absolute ride. You know, and there was great things in like particularly like sequels movies, but the incentive was not to create a story. The incentive was not to further the universe or come up with new interpretations of existing media. The end goal was money, and I think that was clear. Yeah,
Yeah. You get a lot of these new franchises like Harry Potter and stuff like that. I don't think, you know, it's just a story that's written at first, and then it's like, okay, how can I make money out of it now? Whereas Star Wars was more like, okay, we're going to make money out of this. How are we going to do it? You know, it's kind of backwards in that sense. So yeah, that was kind of the natural continuation of last week's conversation. I was kind of thinking of when you brought up messaging, we kind of got onto the fact of like pandering to fans and how these messages sort of make fans unhappy because you had like a bad reaction to the Star Trek story. And it just sort of naturally transitioned to me. That's what I thought about once we left. I kind of thought about, this seems to be happening all the time. Like, why is it happening, and like what's going on, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that was a brilliant transition, because I think that is a huge key to what we see in the Star Wars films, and as you said at the start of this, you and I do talk about Star Wars a lot. You know, this is like something we really like the series, like in thinking about the interpretation of it, and that flowed quite nicely actually from one topic into the other.
Yeah, it's just something. Star Wars is like, I know it's a fictional universe and it's like it's just a story and stuff like that. But I think Star Wars means quite a lot to me. You know, I can watch the movies on repeat. If it's on telly, I'll just put it on and I'll watch it. And I will enjoy myself. It's just it's kind of important to me, and it kind of hurts a little bit to see it like sort of being torn down a little, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think my reaction has been stronger than yours after A Force Awakens. It's sad to say that like I developed a huge disinterest in the series. You know, I love the original films, but after what I saw and after like what we just summed up there about visions of the future, I don't see how it can change, and it's literally made me. I'm still going to see the new films. Anyway, I can't stop myself.
No.
You know, nothing will stop me doing that. But I'm not going to be hyped for it. You know, I'm not going to go in there expecting the world, which I shouldn't have done in the first place, obviously. But they've like hurt their fans here.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's not. I really hope there's something that they snap out of and they realise that they've done it.
And the worst thing about it is how good it could be. You know, because we know it could be phenomenal.
Yeah, I know. It hurts, actually.
Anyway, that's what's been kicking around.
That was good. I enjoyed that. I'm glad. I didn't expect us to cover Star Wars in episode 2, but we knew it was going to happen eventually.